In Java, things that start with the @ sign are called annotations. Let's look at the single most widely used annotation, @override. Here's the idea. When you override, when you replace, when you redefine a method from the parent class or interface, you can mark it with @override. Now, you're not required to. You can override, you can replace, you can redefine methods from the parent class or interface without using @override, but it's strongly recommended that you do so, and I'll explain why in a few slides. So here's a quick example. Suppose I have a class called parent class, and I define a method called blah. And then in my child class that extends the parent class, I want to redefine, I want to override, I want to give a more specific definition of blah. I can do so without using @override, but it's highly recommended, it's considered a standard best practice to use @override to do so. All right, since it works whether or not you do it, why should you do it? Well, there are two reasons. The first is that using @override will let you catch errors at compile time instead of at runtime. I said earlier, compile time errors are good, runtime errors are bad. If you think that you're overriding a method from the parent class, but you declare the method wrong, and you fail to use @override, you won't get a compile time error. You'll just get funny behavior at runtime. So by using @override, you're catching errors earlier, you're catching them at compile time, and also you're expressing design intent. If I look at your code and I just see public string get message, I need to look at your documentation to say, well, what is this? What does it do? But if I see @override public string get message, I know I need to look at the parent class to understand what this method is designed for. So using @override is not required. It works either way, but you catch errors earlier if you use it, and it expresses design intent. These are such important reasons that you should consider the use of @override a requirement. In fact, many people would argue that if the Java designers had thought of this early enough, they would have made it a requirement, and you would have been prevented from overriding methods without specifically saying so. Okay, so here's a quick example. So I make a class called ellipse that implements shape, and I define a method called getArea. And then I make a class called circle, and I think that I'm giving a more specific definition of the area. But I spell it wrong. The real method has a capital A, and I made a typo, as I frequently do in real life, and I declared my method having a lowercase a. Well, right now, with no use of @override, this code will compile. It's perfectly legal to have a method called getArea lowercase a. Java doesn't, enforce that, the fourth character, it has to be an uppercase letter or some such. And so this code is perfectly legal. Java's case sensitive, so getArea uppercase a and getArea lowercase a are two entirely separate methods, unrelated to each other. Then when you run this code and you try to calculate the area of a circle, you get funny behavior, but you only notice this at runtime. No error is given to you at compile time. So what you should have done is use @override. And this is a general principle. Anytime you think that you're replacing a method from the parent class, you're overriding, you're redefining, you're giving a more specific definition of a method from the parent class, say @override. So say I've done that. I've listed @override, but then I still make a mistake. I still say getArea lowercase a. Well, now Java catches me at compile time. This code won't even compile, and you'll get an error message saying there is no method from the parent class called getArea lowercase a. And I'll say, yes, there is, and the compiler will say, no, they're not, and I'll eventually see that it must be right and realize, oh, I made a typo. I thought I was giving the same method name and signature, but I wasn't. I spelled it wrong. Okay, so if you do everything properly, the only benefit of @override is it expresses your design intent. So that someone who comes along and looks at your code says, oh, this is a method that was defined in the parent class. That's where the meaning, the usage comes from. But if you do everything properly, then from a syntax point of view, from a how Java operates point of view, it has no effect. The real benefit of @override is when you make a mistake. When you make a mistake, as in this bottom example, the use of @override will catch that mistake at compile time rather than at runtime. So the long and the short of it is, consider this a requirement. It's not quite as a strong requirement as private instance variables. If you make public instance variables, you'll be kicked out of the Java community and banished to some, remote Siberian snow camp. But at override is almost as strong a requirement. Consider it a necessity. If you're going to override, replace, redefine a method from the parent class, always use at override.